meeting Israel's prime minister today for the first time since taking office, as the White House signals a giant shift in Middle East policy. That meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set for this afternoon, but beforehand, the two will hold a joint press conference at 12 p.m. where President Trump, you know it, is going to be facing some serious questions about the fallout from General Flynn's resignation. Just moments ago, we learned that Democrats have called for a meeting this morning to discuss how exactly to move forward on this. And you're in luck, because we've got the best team in the business here to break all of it down for us. And I want to take you first to NBC's Peter Alexander. He's live at the White House. Peter, tell me specifically about this report that Trump officials were, in fact, in touch with Russians throughout the campaign.
Yeah, multiple reports now suggesting that Trump campaign officials had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence figures during the course of the campaign. They refer to them specifically as having been repeated contacts, as it's described by the New York Times, constant communication. We should note that we've been speaking to a senior law enforcement official today as well, who describes that language as, quote, overheated, specifically referring to the idea of repeated contacts. They do agree that there were contacts that did take place. More broadly, the only name we should note that is listed here in the reporting is Paul Manafort, the former campaign manager to Donald Trump. But we should also note that the law enforcement official can confirm to us that Manafort has not been questioned by the FBI. Despite all of this, we are hearing new pushback from Donald Trump himself. The Trump administration, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, had denied there was any communication between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. Donald Trump himself pushing back today on Twitter. He said simply, this Russian connection is nonsense. It's merely an attempt to cover up the many mistakes made in Hillary Clinton's losing campaign. He added, the real scandal here is that classified information is illegally given out by intelligence like candy, very un-American. So this sort of repeats the pushback we've heard from him and from others, frankly, among them General Michael Flynn, who even before he was forced to resign had said the bigger issue was not that he had crossed any lines, which he insists he hadn't, but the leaking of classified information. Stephanie? I'm
guessing that Mike Pence would say it's un-American for the president or the White House to have classified information and not tell the VP, who in turn was out there speaking to the American people about what specifically Mike Flynn spoke about with the Russian ambassador, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so here's the bottom line. So NBC News was first to report. Let's give you this timetable of the way things played out. First, going back to December 29th. Of course, this is before President Trump had been inaugurated, and this is when we know that President Obama had put into place those sanctions on Russia for its interference during the election. We also know that's the day that Mike Flynn had at least one of these conversations with the Russian ambassador. Then it wasn't until January 26th when the then acting Attorney General Sally Yates reached out to the White House, specifically reaching out to the White House counsel's office, communicating the fact that Flynn, in her opinion, was vulnerable to blackmail and that he may have misled not only Vice President Mike Pence, who had spoken publicly about this, but also some other individuals here. That, again, as we said, January 26th, 15 days passing before Mike Pence, the vice president, was told of those Department of Justice concerns, nearly more than 2 weeks, during which time Pence was effectively left in the dark. It was only as the preparation of another report from the Washington Post was coming out that he had been notified, informed that basically his credibility had been, in effect, shot at.
All right, I want to bring in my panel to help me break all of this down. Charlie Sykes, a man now living without an alarm clock, a conservative author and MSNBC contributor, and Jason Johnson, a politics editor at TheRoot.com, as well as a professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University. NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt is with me as well. Charlie, I've got to start with you. President Trump, in the last 24 hours, we haven't really heard him say much about General Flynn. He hasn't condemned him. What we've heard him continue to do via Twitter is complain about the leaks, saying it's un-American for these leaks to go on. But would you classify what has happened as leaks or whistleblowers from the intelligence community? Because the information that made its way out led to one of President Trump's closest advisors resigning.
Well, what's interesting is how much Trump and the Trump campaign liked the WikiLeaks leaks during the campaign. So when it was Russian intelligence leaking information out, they were quite enthusiastic consumers. Now, apparently, there are people in American intelligence who are doing some leaks, and again, whatever you want to call it. But again, this story just does not seem to connect the dots. My friend Paul Ryan was walking through this and saying there was absolutely nothing wrong with General Flynn having these communications with the ambassador. Well, if there was nothing wrong and he was doing his job, why did he feel that it was necessary then to lie to the Vice President of the United States? And does anyone honestly think that he was making these phone calls without checking with the President, that the President did not know he was having these communications? So again, there are so many questions. The cover story, the dots just simply do not connect.
The dots don't connect, and one of the things that the New York Times pointed out, one of the things that alarmed the intelligence community was repeatedly President Trump not denouncing Russia. Even on that day when Mike Flynn had the call with the Russian ambassador, that tweet that Donald Trump put out, great move on delay by Vladimir Putin. I always knew he was very smart. He's obviously referring to Putin deciding to hold off on sanctions.
Message sent, message delivered, and message heard. That's the way it looks.
Very smart. So I actually want to share, we pulled together some of the things President Trump has said over the last few months.
I've always felt, fine about Putin. I think that he's a strong leader.
I think I would have a very, very good relationship with Putin. If he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him. I've already said he is really very much of a leader.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We've got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Jay?
So, Stephanie, this is what gets me about this. What we can really, all of this, and it's not just the leaks. I said this at the beginning. There has never been a president of the United States who went to war with our own national security agencies and won. And that's what this is. With the moment Donald Trump started insulting our spies, our national security people, they said, oh, really? Really? We've got tapes and receipts. And that is what we're seeing right now. They will take down as many people in this administration as they can until they feel that they have a president who actually respects the work that's being done. And Trump has been falling hook, line, and sinker into this. Look, by the time this is over, they're going to make the Manchurian Candidate look like Captain America, okay? Because these guys are going to be so dirty and so steeped in borscht and Russian intelligence that they will be incapable of running this country. And Mike Pence may be the one who wins.
Mike Pence may be the one who wins. Casey Hunt, I want you to join in here. This is a tough spot the GOP is in again. Do you think we're going to see an independent investigation?
So, Steph, I want to zero in on one particular piece of information and key distinction between what we knew yesterday and what is being reported today and what now congressional officials, lawmakers are reacting to. And that's this idea that there was contact between Trump campaign officials and Russian intelligence officials. I'm making that distinction as separate from Mike Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador. And I think that is what you are starting to see bubble up here among Republicans on Capitol Hill. Lindsey Graham this morning was talking about the potential need for a new select committee to investigate whether these contacts existed. Bob Corker, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, had some tough words on Morning Joe this morning for the administration around this topic. Now, the pressure is going to come on Republican leaders. Mitch McConnell told the Morning Joe team that they are going to keep their investigation in the Senate Intelligence Committee for now. Keep in mind that interview took place before the latest twist in this information. And then they also spoke this morning with Paul Ryan, the House Speaker. Take a look at how he answered questions about this just a few minutes ago.
We already have been doing this. It's not as if the Intelligence Committee has not already been investigating this. They have been and will continue to do that. So it's not as if this hasn't been thoroughly investigated.
So at this point, and this jives with everything we talked about yesterday and what I spoke to officials about here, they want to keep these investigations in the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. There's benefits to that. They have access to more classified information than traditional committees, but there are also things for GOP leadership that allow them more control over what ultimately is released to the public. These investigations are done behind closed doors. There's also a question of, does this reach a point where it has escalated enough that they feel like they they need to do a separate investigation. That, I think, is going to be the question for the next 24 hours. Steph.
Charlie, what does this mean for Mike Pence? Jay was saying Mike Pence, he could be the most dangerous, the most powerful guy. He cannot get fired. You know, he has said he didn't know he was the one who was lied to. He's sort of the victim here, only found out last week. What can Mike Pence do? Because as far as GOP leadership, he's got a much better relationship with the Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnells of the world than President Trump does.
Well, that's right. I mean, keep in mind that this administration has not even started the heavy lifting yet with policy like Obamacare and tax reform. So they're spending all this political capital before they actually need it. But it is interesting, the fact that he was the guy sent out to defend General Flynn. He was lied to. And then someone in the White House decided, let's not tell Mike Pence. If I'm Mike Pence, I really want to know, how did that happen? How did they decide to leave me out of the loop, twisting in the wind like this? Now, obviously, he was very, very upset about this. Otherwise, this would not have triggered what actually happened. But Mike Pence is going to be a valuable player going forward, and he does have some. Look, he's a loyal soldier. There's no question about it.
Loyal to whom?
Well, he's
hold on a second. Loyal to whom? Because one could argue he's a lot more loyal to the Republican Party than he is to President Trump.
And he's got very, very close ties. His ties to Paul Ryan and the congressional Republicans go back a lot longer, a lot deeper than with Donald Trump. But again, there's been no sign that Mike Pence has been anything but loyal so far to Donald Trump.
He comes out of this shining if this gets worse, because he looks like the guy who was always loyal to the party, who was always loyal to the country, and when everything else falls apart, Mike Pence will be the one still left standing. You notice his approval ratings haven't been dropping, okay? And the more that this appears to be something that's a result of Steve Bannon and Donald Trump and all of these outsiders who are supposed to clean the swamp, and Mike Pence is this clean Midwestern governor who was just trying to do the best job he could really end up having a lot more influence if this goes as far as it could.
Charlie, I'm not sure if I buy that. If Mike Pence is truly just the loyal guy, then why would it come out that Mike Pence only found out on Friday? If Mike Pence was just this loyal guy, we wouldn't know that. We would think President Trump, who knows when he knew anything? Mike Pence, who knows when he knew anything? But now, in the last 14 hours, the fact that we now know poor Mike Pence only found out last week, it seems like he's loyal to the Republican Party, not necessarily President Trump.
Well, except we're also talking about an administration and a White House where apparently every single person is leaking on a daily basis. You have 20 senior presidential aides who spend their time trying to get, the other 10 fired, whatever. So that doesn't necessarily surprise me. But it is, look, it's kind of an every man for himself at the moment. Nobody wants to be tagged. I think that there is a recognition within the White House that this thing is not going to go away anytime soon. This has a feel of unraveling to it. And I think that everybody needs to kind of, look over their shoulder and figure out, where am I going to stand when this thing breaks bad?
Okay, before we go, though, help me be a little disciplined here. Give me a history lesson. We're saying it feels like things are unraveling, the wheels are coming off. What has it been like in past administrations?
So I'm glad you asked that, Stephanie. My first thought, I don't go back to Watergate. I go back to Charlie Tree and Johnny Huang with the Chinese attempting to influence the presidential election in 1996. And they were giving money to the Democrats. They were giving money to Al Gore and Temples. And what eventually happened with that, even though there was an investigation, even though Republicans were leading the House of Representatives, Bill Clinton basically said, I'm not going to have an independent prosecutor. It was an absolutely pointless investigation, and nothing ended up happening. The difference now is I think you've got so many people who are so angry about it. I don't think Trump is going to be able to stall on getting an independent prosecutor. At some point, this is going to go beyond congressional committees, and they're going to have a bigger problem on their hands.
See, that's why we needed history. In '96, I was thinking about Cancun. All right, next.